Welcome to the talk about a choreographer's score. Welcome Anne-Therese de Kersmaker and Bojana Svejic. What you just saw here was a kind of a live version of what we are going to talk about now for the next hour. An excerpt of Violent Phase, which was a part of, or still is a part of Phase, made in 1982 in New York. I think I don't have to introduce Anne-Therese de Kersmaker, who's one of the most renowned and challenging choreographers of our times. Welcome and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for that definition.
Welcome. Next to her sits Bojana Svejic, performance theorist, maker, working in contemporary dance and performance as a dramaturg and performer, teaching a lot. She studied musicology and aesthetics at the Faculty of Music in Belgrade and recently defended her PhD on dance and performance in the Center for Research in Modern European Philosophy at the Kingston University, London. She recently published the book Public Sphere by Performance together with Anna Vojanovic, and you can also buy that outside in the bookstore.
Thank you for the advertisement.
But so far for the advertisement. We're going to talk about a publication that the two of you did together, a choreographer's score. And I would basically like to start with the making of the publication and really start by asking you what was your motivation behind it? Because you really give us, I think that's the first time that you give us an insight in how you work, how you make your work, and I wonder why you decided now to do this.
Well, the book was published last year, but I think there were three main reasons that made that book going. First was the fact that, well, as general, the idea was there since a long time, but I didn't find the right people, I didn't have the time, and neither I think the method to do it. First one was meeting Bojana, who was teaching at Parts. And from the very beginning of Parts, I thought of Parts like a place where, that could be a place where there would be reflection about the past and how to give through knowledge and craftsmanship that I built up over in the last 30 years. And very often we would be around the table and the question would give, we want to teach composition, choreographic composition. And the question was, who can teach that? Who can teach that? And also the question said, well, I could do it, but I don't have time. And I never developed methods and systems. It's always in a creation process, in the process of searching, that you develop systems, that you discover systems. So basically, because I was trained as a dancer, I never learned to choreograph. So this was really a self-making process. But then Bojana was teaching at Parts. And we meet by the way, you coming in, I going out. And she said me, she was teaching about rain. She asked me, could you come once in with the students and talk about the making of? Then I told Bojana, I'm gonna take back Elena Zaria. This piece was made in 1985. It was never taken back for all those years. We only have one video. It's nearly wiped out. Fumio is going to reconstruct it, but I finally, after all those years, I'm very happy that we're going to do Phase, Dans Rosas, Elena Zaria, Bartok, those 4 pieces which were like seminal works, in which I danced myself, and I didn't know, I literally went step by step to develop vocabulary, to how you organize vocabulary in time and space. So I said, Bojana, now that we're going to do that, wouldn't be the moment? You know music, you know about the history of dance, you know of the practice of dance today. Maybe this is the moment that we sit together and that I explain you what I know. And then you can use that to teach at parts, and we can share the knowledge. That was the first reason. The second reason was that I was performing Phasen in Dresden, and I was meeting William Forsythe, and we were talking. He was busy with the Motion Bank, came to see, he saw Phasen. It wasn't the first time, but then he said, we should really find ways to give this kind of knowledge through. So please, he really said, you have to do this, and was offering different possibilities how we could support that work. So that was an incitation, how do you say?
Encouragement.
Encouragement to do it. The third was that since a couple of years, we're developing with Rosas a system, a way to get young people to come to see to dance. So
You mean like young amateur people?
Yeah, from like 12, 13. Well, there is the Dancing Kids, which is really from very small kids, but also from secondary school. Secondary school. And we would change our schedules and do general rehearsals that they would come and could be able, we do them as if it's a real performance, but then we do it only for young people. But they would come before, they would have an introduction to dance first at school, and then they would come a whole day to parts. They would take classes themselves. They would do, and I would have 1 hour in the morning, where I would give them an introduction to the pieces, and it was sort of challenging and exciting. But basically, I had an audience who didn't know anything about dance, who was basically not really interested in dance, and in which I had to articulate what those pieces are about and try to grasp or articulate the essence in terms that are comprehensible, without telling lies and like popularizing. Because some of those systems are quite complicated, so you can't neither. If you have to explain a mathematical formula, you can't like
simplify it.
Simplify it if something is sometimes complex. But to find a way that this is invites them to understand. So that was very challenging, thing. Afterwards, they would have a workshop with one of the systems where they would work on the principles of the dance. So those three things together made that we finally decided to do that. We had also the University of Brussels, who supported the project. Who supported the project and was engaging Bojana to do the research work and to do the writing.
And for me, it was interesting to search for a way how to transmit the work beyond what I call this oral mimetic protocol, show and copy, how we work in the studio. Of course, we can't dispense with this method of learning dance, which is rooted in repetition and imitation. But then I thought, instead of reducing it to a technique where somehow ideology seeps in, but we don't get time and space in the studio to discuss the notions, concepts, in fact, what forms, in a wider sense, the poetics of choreography. And that also is reflected in a kind of general lack of choreographic literature. Then for me, it was interesting to approach this as a score that wouldn't allow us to reconstruct the work entirely. So as I say, I think you can't do without having dancers also show and instruct in this way. But at the same time have a further insight into genealogy of various techniques of this work.
Now you mentioned already like 2 points that I actually would like to come back later to. One is the question of the audience, like who is that for? and the question of the score. But before we go to this, I would like to ask also, was it immediately clear from the beginning that it was these 4 pieces? You know, that you would go kind of chronologically?
Well, we could say that...
because you could have also
yeah.
picked, like, say, we do this, and like my favorite pieces, or I don't know.
Because these were revived pieces, and they sort of formed a
on the-
series
yeah.
of
On
what
the
we refer to now as early works.
Yeah, and because they're really literally are the seeds. They were pieces I danced myself, and it was the starting point. So I think it was good that we started from the very beginning, from which I had a total memory, also practicing it myself, and over a long span of time. You know, a piece like Violin Phase, I've been dancing it for 30 years. It's quite exceptional that you can stay with a dance over such a...
I thought also that, to return to this mimesis, that one thing is when you're in a master class and the master shows the craftsmanship at a mature level, but another thing is to read a kind of narrative account of how one, becoming, how to learn from how someone else learned by themselves, kind of autodidactic process of becoming choreographer, and that was what interested me in this type of discourse.
Yeah, and I mean, there was from the very beginning, okay, we will do different pieces, latest works, middle works, but let's start from the beginning, and let's, so,
So you have of course, you have a very informed knowledge about both of you, basically, about the pieces because you danced them, you taught them, you made them, most importantly, of course. And then you choose for a very particular form to kind of transfer that knowledge, which I find so interesting because, you know, also like throughout this Congress, we were introduced to many different ways of how to deal with, let's say, a different kind of dance literature, or as Bill Forsyth is calling it, a different kind of alphabetization of dance. And you choose for a very particular form, which is basically 2 forms contained in one, and they run parallel. And I wonder if you could tell us a bit about your choice, why you choose for these 2 mediums.
You mean the book and the video?
The book and the DVDs, yeah.
Yes. Well, I think it also reflects the process of the making, because we started with, in a tentative way, by just having a conversation or trying in the first interview to exhaust all knowledge.
So the interview was first?
Yes.
Maybe we have to explain, for those of you who haven't seen the book and the publication, it's a publication that contains a book that has basically 4 chapters plus an introduction. And the 4 chapters are organized according to the pieces, and they contain material to the pieces, the interview as the basis, and then plus a whole set of extra material. And
drawings,
there are drawings, what you see also here on the screen. And there is a DVD for each piece, which also contains an interview. We speak later about it. Plus some video recordings and films of the performance of these pieces, of different performances of these pieces. So just for the ones who don't know.
So from this first interview, when we spoke about phase, we decided that would be the technique to recount the making of the pieces, to try to reconstruct the context of intentions and different constraints, or let's say challenges that Anne-Therese posed herself, and how she learned to choreograph through these 4 works. And then we would, let's say, score the interview, or kind of...
What do you mean by score the interview?
It was scripted for the second interview, where in fact we would edit what was the first insight into making it.
I'm sorry, if you really go by steps, this was the first step, was that Bojana studied the materials, notebooks,
archive.
So the performance, or so the tapes, then studied the archives. And then we would have a first interview where she prepared like a strategical, but also in a very simple way, question, what do you want to know? What she would imagine that people would want to know, or that students would want to know. And then we would tape those interviews, They were filmed. And then from that first interview, we would make a line for the second interview. And then those interviews were written out.
Yes, they were
written out and were added with images and with all kinds of material.
Yeah, so we tried to break the text with, as you see, these drawings that Anne-Thérèse especially made for this, and in order to make it really accessible, because I think that's why it's a kind of compound score that comprises both words. There has to be a text, and I think that it runs like a story is also how preferred mode of narration that Anne-Thérèse uses to explain the pieces. That's one thing. Then there are the photographs that they're not there to, let's say, decorate, not in this ostentatious manner, but more to really illustrate, to give images to the movements, especially, there's this idiom of dancers that is precious to dancers, and that also makes it sometimes hermetic to a wider audience. And we try to explain all that. We want to make it accessible so that amateurs de danse would also benefit, that something from dance-specific knowledge could translate into other fields of inquiry.
And the basic system in the interview was that I worked with explaining and with a blackboard, so that I could explain spatial organization and movements and structures, counterpunctual structures, that I would draw them on the blackboard in the most simplest way.
Should we show
yeah, maybe excerpts?
Yeah.
Okay. No, not this one, this one. Excuse me.
Do we need help?
That's the reason why I use a blackboard.
We like to be a teacher.
Yes. Oh no.
The first thing is the knob.
It seems that, what is this? This is
Here.
this mirroring.
Go. And now if you do.
Okay, even if you don't have full screen, you get it.
Yeah. Then is what we call les poses en éventail, the positions in fan.
We're talking
Les
about the
poses en
second
éventail.
movement of Roses Dance Roses.
Les poses en éventail is all those movements combined with a pose. And that pose is a very daily movement. For example, if that is a simple A, when I do it with a pose, it will be or second pose, third pose, last pose. I'm sorry.
So like images.
Like images, the movement is taken cell by cell, stopped, and interfered with very simple sitting poses, which have a certain simplicity, yeah, but who are sort of have a quite daily but emotional taste. The second movement opens with the nodding to each other. Dancers look at each other and pair up. Follows the pose en éventail. All four do A plus the pose. Then the first dancer, one dancer does B. The others join in the pose. Two dancers do C. All four join in the pose. Three dancers do D. And close all together with the E and the pause. So it's a kind of, what do you say, Busby Berkeley? It's the kind of Hollywood thing of We do it with 1, we do it with 2, we do it with 3, we do it with 4.
Like a musical, like
Like
a
a
fan.
musical. Very simple, readable thing. It's a fan. Yeah? That's the second section, part. The third part is what we called, in French they say chipotage. And the chipotage is a very long counterpunctual structure, which is actually similar to the variations in the first movement. That means in the first section, it's going to be around A. In the second, it's going to be around B. And in the third, it's going to be around C. And what is happening? We do a A en éventail, and then I'm going to put, for example, 2 A's. And I'm going to do A, C en éventail, A. Do you see?
Interpolation.
Interpolation. That's for one person. What is the second person going to do? It's going to do the same, but it's going to do more. And then it's going to go here. Yes? What is person 3 going to do? This person is going to go backward. He's going to do A and go E, D, going backward. And the fourth person is going to go in sort of unison. He's going to do 8 A's, for example. You see?
I see.
You understand what we call the chipotage? Chipotage A. Person 1, 2, 3, and 4 do A stop, followed by 2 normal A's. Person 1 is going to do a B stop. Person 3 does a E stop. Now, person 1 and 2 continue with alternating normal A's followed by the following of a stop C. In the meanwhile, person 3 and 4 go alternating normal A's followed by C, stop, and continuing with A normal. Close the chipotage. Person A will do 1 A, person 2 will do also A, person 3, and person 4, ending of the chipotage. C'est assez compliqué. It's very complicated, but basically it's a big counterpunctual structure. Yes? That's the third section. The fourth section is simply the phrase that runs. Ta-ta-ra, ta-ta-ta-ra, ta-ra, B, C,
In
D.
éventails, in fanning.
Not in fanning, even everybody unisono. Just running the phrase, just once. So to create a kind of clear, after all this counterpoint, so simple, phrase simple. And then, what do we have then? Is what simple éventail. It's something similar to these, but instead of with pauses, with simple phrase, with simple cells. Everybody is doing A, repeats A. And then the first person changes to B, second person changes to B, third person changes to B, fourth person changes to B, and the A is coming back. A comes back till we go from A to B. This is an example of a simple éventail, but from B to C. All dancers going to C, and then B comes back. 1, 2, 3, 4. End of the éventail. Very simple. Also Hollywood. Yeah? You see, yeah, very readable. Yeah, the movement moves from one to the other. And then the last one, my blackboard is too small. The last one is what we called the les pauses en éventail, les pauses, but retrograde. It means we're going to start with the E, B.
That's enough. So you see, it gets quite technical at a certain point. I think that this is the most of the formalist analysis that you get in the book.
Well, I have to say what I find really interesting in here is that you get an idea about that your starting as a choreographer was very closely linked in terms of taking the composition of the choreography was closely connected to the musical composition, and that of course throughout the development of these 4 pieces this gets more and more complex, and you kind of also, as I would say, detach yourself more and more from or get more and more independent from the musical score. I wonder if this whole idea of also naming that a choreographer's score came from this close connection with music.
Yes, but it's interesting. I think that we would expect that the choreographic structure mirrors music much more than it actually does. So, for instance, phasing that you saw, or that Anne-Therese referred to in her demonstration in violin phase, doesn't happen simultaneously with the music, but only on one section. So I think that, if I may speak in your name here now, I think it developed by learning the principles, but also adapting them to choreographic composition, but relying on them that they have been they are consistent in music, and perhaps they can lend this consistency to the structuring movement in dance.
One could also say that those 4 pieces, Phase, Rosa, Rosa, Lenazaria, and Bartok, they were at the very beginning. They were like the seed, but they all develop a very specific research on the relationship between dance and music. Phase was the very early phase shifting pieces from Reich, with a very big economy of means, very few vocabulary musically, and for me, literally, I had like 3 or 4 movements, and like in the laboratory, I sort of started to find ways how musical process could be translated in a choreographic process, how that could structurally be connected, and in the same time have its own logic and independency. I learned how you generate vocabulary. Yeah, and how do you organize that in time and space, even if that time is given by the music? Rosas dans Rosas was a different process. Rosas dans Rosas, there was no music. The music was really created together with Thierry Demey and Peter Vermeers. So we had overall nearly narrative, dramaturgical framework that was laying under it, because Thierry proposed to make a piece that would be framed on the course of a day, starting with night, very slow horizontal movement, second movement, Arbeit, modern times, very mechanical working. Third movement was afternoon, was Françoise Hardy and Tous les garçons et les filles de mon âge, and the fourth movement was like sort of the spatial, the spatial like going out into space, and was clearly working on la dépense. How do we say that?
Expenditure. Yeah. La dépense. It's
but the notion from bataille with the bodies like going against the structure. So that was.
And there was a kind of
and then Elena Zaria was a different. Elena Zaria, there was silence, and that was basically a very long extended movements. The music was background. Music was background, theater came in, and it was other materials that came in besides the music, and the musicality was given through the movements. There was an enormous work on detail, and on the working sur la durée, what do you say that?
Duration.
Working on duration and on really detailed movement. And then the fourth piece was, I said to myself, no, Teresa, you should really work once with serious music. So in the sense of what was mainly the fact of I would like to work with music which is serious music from the classical tradition and which is a small formation and which works on counterpoint. And that's how I came to the fourth string quartet of Bartók. So all those pieces have they went step by step teaching myself. I think they were energy-wise also quite different in the sense that Phasen is like nearly a kind of a superb, not exercise, but in abstraction and in mathematical, nearly mathematical organization of the material. Rosas and Rosas was, but I call Phase always was sort of a springtime. Rosas and Rosas was high summer. It was like kind of had even if it's like hidden violence, it had something jubilating. Yeah. Elena Zaria was as much as Rosas and Rosas that was like going outward. Elena Zaria was completely the reverse. It was like closing down, going into stillness. How do you dance when you don't want to dance? I even wouldn't say it was late autumn, it was like deep winter. Yeah, it was like deep winter. There was a lot of sadness in it. And sort of suspended questioning, yeah. And then it's only with Bartók who that next springtime came back in okay, let's go forward again. So that was, I think, also the fact of putting those pieces together developed different aspects of how the material, how I found and what the relationship to the material was. I think when Bojana will show later on the material of Elena Zaria, you will see that the working process and how to generate the material was completely different.
But interestingly enough, now also how you describe your own development, you basically describe it as a circle. And the circle, of course, I mean, we started this afternoon with the circle of violin phase, and the circle kind of keeps coming back in your work. How did you find it? I mean, when was it?
Always comes back. Who was that?
Immer wieder.
Eternal return of the circle, eh?
Yeah.
Eternally return?
But when did it start? Was that, how would you, because you have some...
The things with the circle?
Yeah.
I think that was, it was with violin phase, with this dance. But it was not a strategic choice.
But apparently you always kind of go back to the circle, huh? Also later in your work.
Yeah.
It kind of keeps the
in
gravitating center.
The very first thing was violin phase, then Rosas and Rosas, the ending movement is in the fourth, after the straight lines and the diagonal lines, it's on a circle. The opening section of Elena Zaria is a circle dance. And the heart of Bartók string quartet, which is built in an arch, A, B, C, B, E, the C, the heart of the quartet is a circle, yeah.
Well, maybe we can jump from here a bit to the vocabulary, because that I think would also be a moment to show an excerpt on how you spoke about the development of the vocabulary. I wonder if you have a...
you mean movement vocabulary?
Yes, exactly, yeah.
You want to go to the Elena Zaria material? How material was... Yeah. How movement material was there.
You said once that also this sitting and waiting and performing indicates that the performance is also like a rehearsal, and the rehearsal is the work and the work is rehearsal, and we show this on stage. So, and the music that you used, was this music that you danced to in the process?
Well, we used a lot of different music. We worked in silence, but to generate the vocabulary, we used a lot of also pop music.
But that didn't make it into the...
Cotugno, Umberto Tozzi. I had a whole collection of pop music on which we looped movement, and we went that very, and then we would take the music away and do it in silence.
This is Elena Zaria, this is what we should say. This also answers your question why we decided to use video as well, not only to give somehow the effective tone of Anne-Therese remembering the process of making, but also we could include documentary footage and excerpts from the performance. But I'm not sure if this shows really the vocabulary. That was just one of the ways of generating it or using music in a piece which wasn't anchored to the structural ground of music as in the other three pieces. But what is characteristic of this early period is this blend between formally abstract movement, which we see mostly in Phase, and still leaning on pedestrian, everyday, daily movement. And within that, I think there's such an economy in Anne-Therese's vocabulary in general. I mean, there's always an economy of means, but there's a, let's say, structural, contrapuntal complication, manipulation of that material. That it was actually, for me, the most challenging to look for terms to describe the syntax of this movement. When is it a cell? What is when is it a phrase? When is it a theme? And how does that relate to musical structure? And then, you know, you get these terms like chak, and I think every dancer knows what they mean by chak, and they always mean something else. And then
it's a term for the dancers of the 80s. I think the chak was in the 80s quite present.
And it's actually French.
It's
We have
French.
some
People
laughter
hate
in the
it.
audience.
Yeah, but then it was, I think,
Czech generation.
interesting to elucidate what it means in different pieces. And I think we don't shy away from that side of dance, because that is, let's say, the practical jargon between dancers in general. Yeah.
I think also, like for Bartok, I mean, you saw now, I showed from Phase, and then for Rosanna Rosa and Elena Zarya. For Bartok, we took basically a different system, because there is a film of Wolfgang Golub, Hopla, and there we basically took the same explanations, but for the film material, I did really nearly a complete voice-over of the piece.
Yeah.
Do you have part of it, or is it complicated to find? It's one of the fifth move, or you don't?
But it is the same, basically the same procedure that we use in the other excerpts that you saw, in terms of this running commentary to dance, which I think identifies then even better what is what and how to relate to movement. Yeah.
But I mean, speaking about the vocabulary, of course, at a certain moment you also add another layer, which is like taking from, as you say, the pedestrian movement, the sort of sometimes almost abstract-looking movements. All of a sudden, so if you add the personality of the dancers in the beginning yourself, and then later the ones of the other dancers, in terms of how they even if they're moving in synchronicity, in unison. You see their personality. They do things a bit differently. You know, they look at each other. They nod at each other. You see that there's almost a theatrical element coming in, like on top of the vocabulary.
So what's the question?
No, I'm just commenting on it, and I think this is, to me, that looks almost like a next step. You know, in the working with the vocabulary. No? I
don't think so.
No, I understand what Bettina means in terms of that, you know, at that time, rosas were for dancers, and sometimes in the book we refer to Fumio, but maybe Fumio Ikeda is no longer dancing this. So it's true that there's a kind of idiosyncratic, personal or particular movement style that almost creates characters. I'm looking for, and I have a difficulty to up, if I go like this, I want to show you this. These are some excerpts from the book. I mean, this is really the posing of a girl band, and that's really connected to Rosas Dance Roses. And when you refer to this personal style, it's what it was then. But now we have like third, fourth generation of dancers, which means that these characters are objectified. They become some kind of figures that can be learned as choreography.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that what was a crucial difference was that it was dancing myself, and all this vocabulary was only vocabulary that I could dance also myself. It were small constellations. Yeah, Faz was 2, 4 resonance was 5/4. It's a different thing, and they were exclusively women. So the very notion of counterpoint, of course, came in when I started to work with men, which was the duet of Microcosmos. And when in the same way, when I was dancing myself, those pieces were created would be carried by the vocabulary which were linked to my movement patterns and to my body. So when I worked with other dancers, they would always have a very big impact on what the piece finally became. Yeah.
Maybe now that's also the moment to go back a bit to this, like the self-learning process, as you described it in the beginning, that you really sort of, as you see in the development of the pieces, you see how you challenge yourself in almost giving yourself tasks to work with, and you see the development of that, and then of course now. And you even describe it, I think, in the interview of Bartók. You say, as you said already before, I wanted to work with an intelligent piece of music in order to be really challenged to develop myself as a choreographer. So that, of course, goes almost into the direction like I have to teach myself. I have to develop a method to work with me and others. And now you give this away. I wonder how this idea, as you said before, of craft, choreography as a craft, how you see this. Is this a notion that's important to you?
I think craftsmanship is very important for me, because I even would say it's for me a political thing. These were working processes which were very slow and very carefully made. It was like, I remember like with Bartók would be, okay, today we're gonna write bar 23 to bar 26, and maybe at the end of the day, and that we would speak about 10 seconds maybe. When I see that, like the detailed working with Elena Zaria, so sometimes today I'm saying, oh my God, how did I have so much patience?
And how much
no,
time?
but it's really true. Yeah, it's the normal rate of working on a piece is 4 months. It's always been like this, 4 months. But it's this kind of slow work, slow work which is not made for. Slow work doesn't give slow dance necessarily, but to a certain extent, yeah, it's not to be consummated quickly. And it's taking dance seriously, and so it I find craftsmanship is really it gives a kind of satisfaction, I think, also about the fact that which is totally opposite of the economical and political logic of what we are into, and which goes at an incredible high rate. I think the word of. I mean, I don't want to get into a moral issue, but there is something very satisfying and to see things slowly grow, you know, and that you don't boost them up with. And it's by moments not always easy to go slowly, because So yeah, I think craftsmanship is very important.
So in the sense, you could also say that creating the publication like this, so that it has this kind of almost, how do you say that, low-key appearance at the beginning with the chalkboard and you explaining, and then getting more and more complex in the explanation, is also a way of drawing us, readers, users, audience, however you call us, take us with you and kind of take you into the complexity of it?
Yes. I remember that I would frown when Anne-Therese would say, it's so simple, you know, or it's like, or it was all, how would you say, it's so simple, it's so natural. And of course it's not, because it was constructed, but with this patience of building layer by layer. And maybe we can say now that we are working on we just finished another choreographer's score on the recent works, the last two performances that form a diptych on the 14th century music of Ars Subtilior, on Attendant and Cesena. And there's another typical remark that Anne-Therese gives, which is opposite, and I think that kind of attests to maturity of this craftsmanship. We say, here I didn't know, I had to stop and hold back and think, and that's where it takes time to hesitate.
To also, huh?
Yes, and not cover it up with kind of habitual savoir-faire. So it's not craftsmanship in terms of savoir-faire,
recipes.
But recipes or conventional wisdom, but more in terms of, so what does that particular problem, what kind of solution does it require? And can we find the adequate solution to that problem? But we have to create conditions to produce problems, to pose problems. Otherwise, things get repeated, reproduced, always the same. So I think that, I mean, when you say, I had so much patience, I mean, now in the rehearsal of a new piece, you are also constructing 9 days, 2 pages of a score, but we're talking about spectral music of the end of 20th century, so which is another level of complexity also for dancers to be able to retain music and dance to it. You know, that's something that I think is not popular nowadays. It's sort of it's considered old-fashioned, too modernist. But I think that I'm astonished at the excellence of how these people develop skills, because not everybody has nowadays musical education if you go into dancing.
But then, would it be too far to say that also making choreographies nowadays is still a self-learning process for you? I mean, after 30 years after you started that journey?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, speaking about challenges,
but maybe, how shall I say, maybe isn't that...
Should it always be the case?
Yeah, it should be always be
but
the case.
It's
No,
not,
a truly creative process is always a process that comes out of wondering and out of searching for the shape or of something that you imagine or that you question. Yeah. So.
And could you share with us some challenges of today? I mean, where would you imagine to go? Is there things that you think, wow, this is a territory I haven't touched yet?
Well, the thing I'm working on right now is Vortex Temporum of the French composer spectralist Gérard Griset. I have a long history with music, and for me working with Ars Subtilior I never worked with music before Monteverdi, beginning of the 17th century. Working with this Ars Subtilior was for me a little bit like coming home. I like this music a lot. I learned a lot about how to create counterpoint. I just had this premiere with Boris Sharmatz, where I'm very happy. I mean, for me, Bach takes a very special place. For me, Bach is a unicum. Yeah. So Bach will always be there. I like, as I said, this music from before 600 is like coming home. And then there is the music of the 20th century. You know, I never did romantic music, besides the piece Verklärte Nacht of Schönberg, and then the very specific approach I did with Jérôme Bell in Drei Abschied, which was more a conceptual piece. I skipped all Schubert, Schumann, Brahms, because maybe I'm a little bit afraid of it. But then there is the 20th century, and basically the music of the 20th century is a really very challenging music to choreograph to, because there is no pulse anymore. Harmony is completely dissolved. So to combine it with dance I find that difficult. I find it difficult, but I would not say that I find it a moral duty to do it, but in the same time, this is the music of our century, well, the previous century already, but this is the music of our day. So I find I would like to find solutions to this. And we could say, for example, in the fourth string quartet of Bartók, I have a very clear memory when I came into the studio and I made the music, listen to the dancers, and I go like, difficult music. And then after the working process, this was normal dance music for the dancers, and I think for a part of the audience too. We all know that Bartók's music is very much linked to folk music. With spectral music, that's even more, it's even more challenging, but this I like.
Maybe one last question, because we run a bit out of time. One last question to the whole process of making the publication. What we learned, and we learned that from the material, but also from the way how you talk about, is that the material is still very close to you. I still have to ask this question, were there also things that you rediscovered in revisiting the material that you kind of had forgotten, or that you had, that work?
I think the very process of somebody asking me a question and urging me to go back in my memory and to articulate very clearly and to write down, it was it was a kind of like an analysis. Which was very helpful. I think your memory forgets more than your body, so it was a very nice three things: reflecting on the past, being in the past by still performing the pieces, because I still perform Faz, I still perform now and then Rosas and Rosas and Elena Zaria, and in the same time working on being busy with new work. So that gives it was a very it's a very learning process for me too, and we're now the second choreographer's corps.
Exactly, maybe that is also the moment when you because this is the first moment where we're going to see.
Yeah, it's a bit of a working version, but
exactly.
Maybe
you can also describe it in a few words.
So it's a choreographer's corps based on the two last works, or let's say recent works, which are with large ensembles, including musicians, En attendant and Cesena, that premiered at the Avignon Festival in 2010 and 2011. And they also include collaboration with Björn Schmelze for Cesena and Anne-Veronica Janssens and Michel François, who are visual artists that Anne-Therese has been collaborating already for a while. Now, I'm sorry, but I'm really fiddling with this.
We need the chalkboard.
And then this is out. And then the DVD is in, but I don't get it. That's going to appear at a certain point. So the book is coming out in July, and we thought, since it's two works, that it will be a thinner book, but it's the same size, and I think it's much more elaborated. And
divided over the 8 dancers. The very beginning begins with what I call a smashed version.
You see, it's the same setup.
the choreography in very condensed counterpoint. All dancers are involved, but done on a very reduced space. The material which is normally done over the totality of the space is now done in a small corridor so that they touch each other, and there are 2 parameters in which they guide their touching. It is or they support each other or they give resistance. These were parameters on which we worked. You know, we developed movement vocabulary separately, yeah, but then we did also partnering work. And with those partnering, the counterpunctual structure is transformed through what I call physical manipulation with those parameters, resistance and support. This smashed version of the version that you will see later without being smashed in its normal state is done twice on A1, done starting from Jardin to Cour, and then in
Return.
A2 it is done in a mirror. It starts on the other side and it comes back in the same way. Yeah? After that follows the B.
Yeah, and that's maybe enough.
So you use the same setup,
Yes.
and basically it was also the same working structure on how you work together.
Yes, but what it kind of reveals is that over 30 years, the systems for generating movement, also in terms of counterpoint, because we're talking about this peculiar 3-part, 3-voice counterpoint of the end of the 14th century, how that affects the work, or how the style has changed. The écriture, the choreographic writing is very different. There's also something that is characteristic of the work of Roses, at least in these pieces, that the theatricality is not explicit. It kind of remains as a meta-narrative basis of characterization. So how vocabulary comes is not, it's opaque. There are figures, there are meanings, and that's also something that we unearth in the book. What else I could say, that it's, I think that the reflection is not anymore a matter of recollection, how it was, how it went, because these pieces were performed and they were made while we were making the first book. So I think that there are interferences between the book and the creation process of En attendant and Cesena. And for me, it was also an opportunity to observe how these pieces develop and to see how they're received in front of different audiences. And you know, the role of the dancers also changes, because there's no longer this emblematic identification of Roses. Roses is a company, but we have a variety of dancers who have male and female, have different histories, different age, and so on. And that plays an important role. Also, to understand the logic of the creation, how you delegate, how you pose problems, how you solve problems. I think it's a very different nature of the process than those early works. And to me, it was in a certain way richer, or maybe more sophisticated, to see, so those were the seeds, and now this is what counterpoint looks like. It's sculptural, and so on. Yeah.
And then, of course, for us, it will be very interesting to talk again in 2 years or so and see where you are then in your kind of self-analysis process.
Yes.
Well, I would take this as an opportunity to thank the two of you very much for giving us this insight in your work, sharing all this information with us, and also for the project that you did it, because I think it's a very it's a wonderful way to sort of give us inside knowledge in your creative way of working, and that increases our possibilities to dive deeper into your work. That's wonderful. Thanks a lot. I don't want to stop this now. I thought we maybe have, although questions? We are terribly over time, maybe if there are some very urgent questions, you were so patient with us, so maybe we should give you some
Yes.
possibility to ask some questions. And maybe if we could raise the light in the audience a bit, that would be
There's a
great. And I
question
see
over
somebody waving there. So if you're okay with that, we would
Yes.
allow some questions.
It's a congress, so.
Okay, so I see somebody.
Hi. I really would like to know, what do you mean by counterpoint? I mean, I know...
Counterpoint?
Yeah, I know...
It's a musical term.
I know,
a musical
yeah.
term is that it's a musical term that instead of we're both doing the same thing at the same time, and if she does something different than me in the same time, that's basically, it's a musical term.
And it's a strict counterpoint would mean that it's the same material, but it's temporally or spatially dissociated, or there's divergence. It's
like
not only
working
that.
with oppositions?
Sorry?
Working with opposition?
No, no.
Like for example, like
canon,
this.
canon. You know what canon is?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
I just try to...
Bojana, do like this, do like this.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, no, the same thing, really the same thing.
I see, now you're
Allez,
a
doe
dancer.
That's basically what I say, that's basically a unisono. We do the same thing at the same time.
We
Yeah,
should do clapping music.
yeah, well, hold on.
No?
And now, if I'm not going, so I change the time, no? Yeah, but I also can change the architecture. Like, for example, I can go. So I have counterpoint, yeah?
Okay. Thanks for the explanation.
Okay.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
And thank you for spending that time with us.